One of the biggest stories that came out of week one, probably the biggest story in fantasy football because he was usually the #1 waiver ad, was Puka Nacua.
Yeah.
So where do you stand with him moving forward? Do you think that was just a blip? Is he going to become irrelevant if and when Cooper Kupp returns? Or do you think that people should have sort of gone nuts and spent a lot of FAB on him?
The situation that we find ourselves in for week 2 is extremely difficult because in week 1, when a rookie in their first game, 15 targets, I think it was, it was just ridiculous. You have to go after that. You have to chase it. This is not Ogletree caught 2 touchdowns on 4 targets or whatever, where the production's there, but there's nothing behind it. This was, holy crap, this rookie is a revelation. Is this the new Robert Woods for Sean McVay and that offense? Like, can he fill into that role? Who knows when Cooper Kupp is going to be back? That you still have to say if Cooper Kupp is back this year. It could be week 5. It could be never. So you have to play like Cooper Kupp is not there. So go after Puka. And yet you find him against the San Francisco 49ers, who will be able to put far more pressure onto Matthew Stafford. The Seattle Seahawks, I mean, they were generating nothing. Stafford looked so good. Just watching the game, I mean, he was sharp. The passes were exactly where they needed to be, and he had a player in Puka who could fulfill when those opportunities were given. So I think we can say that, yeah, Puka's a good player, but I'm very, very worried about the rubber band snapping completely the other direction in this matchup, and then all hell is going to break loose when Puka is 2 for 28 this week on 6 targets, and people are like, well, I dumped all the FAB, and then maybe then it's an opportunity to be opportunistic and go scoop up Puka for far cheaper than they did. But season long, it's hard to not be in on what you saw week 1. And the game could have been so much bigger. I mean, you had at least the one route I can think of where Puka laid out and Stafford overthrew him by like a half a foot. If that pass is just slightly better, Puka scores again. You know, it's like, so I'm in on Puka, but I am very concerned. I missed out on him everywhere. Because I had to bid on stupid running backs, of course. So I didn't have the FAB for Puka, but I'm concerned for the people that dumped heavily into week 2, because if you did, you have to play him.
Right.
Like you can't spend 20+% of your season FAB and then be like, sweet, go on my bench there, guy, and we'll see what happens. No, you plug him right in.
Right, and you're going to play him after he sees 15 targets the week prior, right? You know, that's
exactly.
The other thing, is that you just can't let that sit on your bench. You're gonna want him in there at least as like your wide receiver 3 or your flex. You know, I'm in on Nacua. I agree with you that when you see younger players really break out and have games like this, especially when they have, you know, I talked about this in the mailbag too, but especially when they have a backbone, the way that you know, like Zay Flowers, for instance, is a lot easier to say, okay, I'm gonna be in. We're gonna talk about him in a little bit, but you know, Zay Flowers is a lot easier to say, oh yeah, I mean, he's a stud because he was a first-round pick. He had this great production, you know, yada yada yada. Everything looked good for him in the draft as a prospect, all that. Nacua falls. He's a day 3 guy, and realistically, if you look at history of day 3 players who did what he did week 1, I looked at guys who had a 25% target share or better since 2011 in week 1 as rookies. And it's not great. I mean, the best comp, honestly, if you just strictly look at day 3, right? I'm not talking about like because there were a lot of day 1 guys, a handful of them in day 2 that did fine. But Rashad Green was one. I think he was day 3, but he was one back in Jacksonville, and he saw 13 targets. His first ever NFL game, he saw 13 targets. He maxed out the rest of his career. He never saw a game with more than 4 after that. And so, you know, you have a little bit of that going where you're like, I'm a little fearful that it could go that direction. But, you know, I wasn't prospecting the way that I am now when Rashad Green was a rookie. It was like 2015 or something like that. And I liked Nacua enough as a prospect to say, and then you combine that with, you know, all the hype that was going on out of Rams camp. I mean, there are certain teams that beat writers are pretty on point with, and there are certain teams where they're not as on point with, and there are certain beat writers that are very on
Of
point.
course, yep.
And I got to give Jordan Rodriguez from The Athletic a ton of props for 2 calls with the Rams this year. She was hyping up Puka Nacua, talking about how the team really liked him a lot and et cetera, during the summer and in July and such. And then the other thing that she talked about was Kyren Williams, where she said that Kyren Williams was going to dig into Cam Akers' role. And that really changed my mind in the way, I wasn't really aggressively drafting Akers, but I actually ended up making Akers a fade because of that report and because of the way that we saw some of that usage playing out. And then you look at Kyren Williams in week 1, he was their RB1. I know that Akers ended up seeing more touches, but Williams outsnapped Akers 26-4 in the first half. He saw dramatically more routes run than Akers. Do you think that is for real? Do you think, look, to be fair, we saw this with the Rams even last year with Darrell Henderson. Right?
Yes.
And so do you think this is for real? Are you buying heavily into Kyren Williams? Are you just saying, I'll see if I can get him off the waiver wire and kind of go from there? Or are you going to take the contrarian route and go the Cam Akers way?
I will not go the Cam Akers route. I will buy into Kyren being the guy. And that's having followed the entire story of Cam Akers, Cameron, as we call him on the Footballers podcast. We've made him more formal.
Yes,
but
of course.
Like the tale of last year was so wild, of the fact that he was even back from the Achilles injury, which is like, at least we don't have a ton of guys with the Achilles injury, right? But it's kind of been the end, or at least the end for multiple years. So he's back. That's already fascinating. But then you get, I don't remember, like a month, maybe 6 weeks in, and then we have the whole explosion over social media, the reports. The coaching staff says that Akers is not going to take another snap for this team, and we are going to trade him. He's inactive. They're actually trying to get rid of him. Shockingly, nobody wants a running back coming off an Achilles tear where you don't know for sure that he's back. Shocking stuff. And so then the Rams, to their credit, kind of tucked tail. But kind of at this point, their season was already toast because Kupp's shut down, Matthew Stafford is shut down. We just got to put somebody out there, and it turns into Akers having this huge role, and then he's fantastic with it. Not against the toughest of competition, but it's still, you can only play the team who's in front of you, and he was great. And so then the question that we had to wrestle with all offseason is he that good? And do the Rams, because I don't know where you were on Akers coming into the league. He was a very exciting prospect.
Yeah, I liked him a lot. Yeah.
The draft capital, everything pointed to Akers is going to have a good career for fantasy football for us. So you had to balance all that with everything that had gone on. So it's not shocking. And on top of that, we also had the vague reports after week 1 where Kyren Williams got hurt on special teams. And that's where we saw a whole bunch of Akers, and it was like, what are we doing here? And it was, the report was actually Kyren Williams was supposed to be this guy. That was their plan all along. Which I get it. Some beat reporters, they talk about they're not allowed to share certain things, which is, I don't know. It's just this weird agreement that they have with teams, but you had to at least hold on to that too. That's strange. They wanted to feature Kyren Williams, but he got I think a high ankle sprain right at the beginning of the year, and a high ankle sprain for a running back, it can derail a whole season, which it basically did that to Kyren. So that information is all still there. So it's not shocking what happened in week 1. It's not shocking that a player that McVay was like, I don't want you on my team. Mm-hmm. And then they just had to give him all the work, and now you look back and you go, were they featuring him to maybe trade him? Were they punishing? They're like, hey, Akers, why don't you go take some more snaps, buddy? These games are worthless. Go get beat up. There's just so many human elements that we don't have access to. But anyways, that's a really long-winded way of me saying it should not be surprising that Kyren Williams has ended up being the preferred running back for Sean McVay and co. Now, does that translate into actual fantasy value? It's the same thing as I'm terrified of Puka for week 2. Kyren against the 49ers, like with what – not that the Steelers – you were hoping they had fixed the offensive line at least a little bit, but Najee and Warren, I mean, there's nothing, absolute nothingness. You think that the Rams are going to be able to get it done? It's like I have no confidence in that.
Yeah, I feel I think the other thing too with Kyren is I didn't like he was fine as a prospect, but he didn't have the explosiveness. He had a horrible speed score. I mean,
the combine the combine destroyed him because he was when we always start our scouting process around January when the regular season ends. Because
same.
These people that can do college and the pros, shout out to you. I do not have the mental bandwidth or energy in my old man body to handle that. So I start scouting guys in January pretty fresh, and like I don't keep up with college. I don't know what's going on. So everything is pretty fresh to me. I just kind of see who's trending to be drafted. I'm like, or you know, and always the combine invite list gives you a really good indicator. Sure. But Kyren's tape was so freaking impressive of him at Notre Dame. I mean, like just he was smaller, but I mean he's breaking tackles all over the place. He didn't look slow in the college tape, but then the old combine came through, and you were hoping it was okay. This is a Dalvin Cook situation. I watched Dalvin Cook. I watched him play in college. He was incredible. He tanked the combine. They took him in the second round. He was fantastic. Nope. The draft said we do not care about this player.
Right, exactly. Like. The other, like his speed score was so bad, which is weight adjusted 40 time for those who are totally unaware, but his speed score was so bad that the players that have been successful with his low of a speed score, because speed score alone is not incredibly predictive, but when you look at it with certain thresholds, it can be at least kind of throw guys out and say, you don't really need to go after this player necessarily, unless other things and part of his profile can really elevate, that low speed score. You know, Kyren Williams is a great pass catcher, which is something that I always look for. I know you do too. Great pass catcher coming out. But that speed score just tanked him. And all the players who even had a little bit higher speed score compared to Kyren have not been successful in the NFL. And that to me is one of the biggest things with Williams and what differentiated, at least for me, Puka to Kyren in terms of adding guys off the waiver wire, or at least recommending, to folks about guys off the waiver wire, is I just don't know if Kyren Williams is a great running back. Like I think that he could be solid. I think a lot, but I just think a lot of running backs can be solid. Like there's people that are talking junk on Rachaad White right now, for instance, and how inefficient he was.
I am.
Yeah. Totally understand that. But at the same time, there's only, to me, instead of looking at the running back position from the perspective of, there's all these different tiers and layers. To me, it's literally just, are you a true difference maker? Are you Derrick Henry, Breece Hall, these rushers that, I mean, like Breece Hall on this past week just showed us all like how elite he actually is, right?
Right.
And so are you that kind of player? Oh, you're not? Okay, well then we're just going to cross our fingers and hope that your team gives you a lot of volume, right? Like that's, and hopefully you're a pass catcher, which is exactly what we want for fantasy, right? Which is my argument sort of like with like a Rachaad White right now, where it's like, yeah, I don't know if he's going to be that electric as a runner. I don't think he will be that electric as a runner. But if you look at all the peripherals week 1, he was top 10 in route participation. He was top 5 in snap share. If that continues, period, he could be trash and still be okay in fantasy football, And I kind of see that with the Kyren Williams. I don't think Kyren Williams is trash. I don't think Rachaad White's trash. But I'm just saying, like, with a player like Williams, it's hard to go so hard with him because I don't know if the talent's obviously not Breece Hall-esque. But this coaching staff seems to favor him, so you should at least be looking at him off the waiver wire.
Yeah, you have to care about who the coach cares about, because it's not like there's not 3 running backs on the field at the same time. There's just the one, and I understand week 1 that's a big win for LA. That's a big win for the Rams, but and maybe maybe the whole world of football is wrong about the Rams, maybe, but this was one of the teams that is favored to get the number 1 overall pick. Like they're already, like, a lot of LA fans are already drafting Williams as their starting quarterback of the future. Maybe not anymore that you won week 1, which Arizona, we appreciate that. Thank you for winning that game, LA. But it's like, was that just are we all wrong, or is that like or is that a trend? Like the Rams are just going to be one of those teams that surprise us and they're way better than they are, because they will have to be. They will have to be way better than you thought they were going to be for Kyren to actually pay off.